Speed and Nguyen's Deep Dive podcast is an official podcast made by Speed and Nguyen with the voice made from Google's Notebook LM. Do not reproduce our podcast without permissions from the owner. Welcome to the Speed and Nguyen's Deep Dive podcast.
Glad to be diving into this one.
So imagine you are sitting on your couch on a Friday night, right?
Just trying to relax.
Exactly. You fire up a stream of a live European football match, and you think, you're just saving a few bucks by bypassing a subscription.
Seems totally harmless.
Right, but behind the screen, your home Wi-Fi network has actually just been hijacked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that little streaming box under your TV is now bidirectionally routing traffic for a global extortion syndicate.
Crazy.
They are literally using your living room's IP address as a shield against international law enforcement.
And that is the reality of modern digital piracy. It just completely shatters that old illusion of the victimless crime.
Right, the kid downloading a song.
Exactly. It's no longer just some teenager in a basement sharing a movie file. It is a highly sophisticated, heavily weaponized infrastructure.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive today. We are going to explore the massive fallout of that exact infrastructure.
Because things are hitting a breaking point.
They really are. Right now, this very month, May 2026, Vietnam is executing a completely unprecedented nationwide crackdown on digital piracy.
A massive sweep.
And the stack of sources we're looking at today. We've got official government directives, legal analyses from global firms like Baker McKenzie and Rouse.
A really dense legal material in there.
Very dense. Plus, real-time cybersecurity reporting. And it all reveals a situation that has basically escalated into a billion-dollar geopolitical trade war.
It's huge. And to understand why the Vietnamese government is deploying such overwhelming force right now, we have to look at the sheer terrifying scale of the target they're trying to dismantle.
Okay, let's unpack this scale, because the raw numbers operating out of Vietnam recently they're difficult to even visualize.
They really are.
Let's look at the takedown of FEF movies. They operated their peak infrastructure between January 2023 and June 2024.
Basically the biggest player on the board.
Yeah, FEF movies was essentially the world's largest piracy ring. In that 18-month window, it logged over 6.7 billion visits.
Which is just an astronomical number. And if you think about the server bandwidth required to handle 6.7 billion visits.
It can't just be one computer.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You realize we are not talking about a couple of rented servers in a closet. To process that kind of traffic without crashing, you need an enterprise-grade content delivery network.
Like a CDN.
Exactly, a massive CDN. You need massive load balancers, distributed server nodes across multiple continents, and a dedicated team of network engineers just to keep the site online.
It's like a fully funded corporate enterprise.
It really is.
And it isn't just global networks like FEF movies. The domestic platforms are running these parallel empires.
Oh yeah, the local ones are huge too.
Like the Institute of Copyright and Digital Asset Technology in Vietnam tracked a platform called ROFIM. This single hub racked up over 103 million visits, hosting over 18,000 pirated titles. We're talking major studio feature films from the US, China, South Korea, alongside thousands of localized TV series.
But what's fascinating here is how they pay for it all. Running enterprise-grade CDNs and load balancers costs an absolute fortune.
Right, massive overhead.
Yeah, these syndicates have massive overhead. And because they obviously cannot charge a traditional subscription fee via credit card.
Because they're illegal.
Right. They monetize the user in a much more insidious way.
Which brings us back to that hijacked living room scenario I mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
See, I always assumed these illicit streaming boxes simply scraped video files from hidden servers. It's just a one-way download.
A lot of people think that.
But if they're acting as proxy nodes, you are saying the connection is bidirectional. The criminals are actually using the viewer's internet connection as a mask.
Precisely. And we look at the research from cybersecurity expert Professor Paul Waters, the mechanics are actually alarming.
What did he find?
Well, his data indicates that piracy sites in Vietnam are nearly 10 times more likely to contain malware than legitimate platforms.
10 times?
Yeah. Almost 72% of these sites deploy malicious code. But it goes way beyond just infecting a laptop to steal, your email passwords.
Wait, so they are installing background protocols on the physical devices themselves?
Yes. The user buys an illegal streaming device, plugs it directly into their home router, and connects it to their network.
Just trying to watch a game.
Right. But that device contains firmware that silently opens a backdoor. It literally turns the home network into a proxy node.
Oh, wow.
So when a global cybercrime syndicate wants to launch a ransomware attack or route fraudulent financial transactions, they don't do it from their own computers.
They use ours.
They bounce that traffic through a network of thousands of infected home streaming boxes.
So it's like someone committing a bank robbery, but routing their getaway car through your driveway so the tire tracks lead directly to your front door.
That is the perfect analogy. The authorities trace the extortion attempt, and the IP address just points to a family in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City who just wanted to watch a Premier League match.
That is terrifying.
It is. And operating a global extortion proxy network out of domestic living rooms doesn't just attract the attention of local police.
Right. It becomes an international issue.
Exactly. It creates a massive geopolitical liability. The sheer volume of this illicit infrastructure essentially forced a severe international response, which in turn forced the Vietnamese government's hand this month.
Let's follow that chain of causality, because the government launched this peak enforcement campaign with a highly specific, very aggressive window.
Right. May 7 to May 30, 2026.
Yeah, this wasn't a gradual policy rollout. It was an emergency break. And looking at the documents, it was triggered directly by Washington.
Yeah, the timing is not a coincidence. Just days before this crackdown was ordered, the United States Trade Representative, the USTR, released its 2026 Special 301 report.
And what did that report do?
For the first time in 13 years, the USTR placed Vietnam on the priority foreign country list.
And landing on that list isn't just a diplomatic memo. It is the trigger for a devastating economic chain reaction.
Massive consequences.
The documents explicitly point out that the Trump administration has threatened fresh tariffs over these IP violations.
Right.
And just to neutrally report the macroeconomic stakes here, they are existential. The U.S. currently maintains a multi-billion-dollar trade surplus with Vietnam.
It's actually larger even than its surplus with China so far in 2026.
Right, so the leverage here is immense.
Absolutely immense. The sources detail how the Trump administration had previously unveiled massive duties of 46% on imports from Vietnam.
46%, that's huge.
Yeah, but following U.S. Supreme Court ruling, those tariffs were negotiated down to 10%.
Okay, so they caught a break.
They did. But the new USTR report, citing inadequate enforcement against online piracy, widespread counterfeiting, and ineffective border enforcement, means the threat of restoring those crippling tariffs is looming right now.
So the Vietnamese government is basically staring down the barrel of severe economic barriers over stolen movies and sports broadcasts.
They had no choice. They had to prove immediate, quantifiable action.
Which explains Prime Minister Lee Min-hung's urgent directive to the ministries. And what really stands out is that he didn't just ask them to, try harder.
No vague language.
He put a hard mathematical quota on the enforcement.
Exactly. The directive mandates at least a 20% increase in detecting copyright infringements and blocked customs shipments compared to May 2025.
A 20% quota.
It's a highly calculated move. A 20% quota gives the government concrete, undeniable metrics to slide across the table to the USTR to prove they're actively dismantling the infrastructure.
But I have to imagine domestic corporations are also putting immense pressure on the government here.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a 20% quota satisfies international trade partners. But locally, telecommunications giants like Viettel, VMPT, and FPT Telecom have been bleeding revenue for years.
They're exhausted.
They are the ones paying millions of dollars for the legitimate broadcasting rights to these sports leagues, only to have their signals instantly stolen and monetized by pirate syndicates.
And that internal pressure is just as vital as the international pressure. The domestic telcos have been practically begging for a legal framework with actual teeth.
Because the old system wasn't working?
For years, the authorities were essentially playing a losing game. They were going after the digital tenants,
Like the individual uploaders.
Exactly. The individual anonymous uploaders or the disposable websites that just pop up and vanish.
Which is useless because tracing an anonymous uploader through a proxy network is nearly impossible.
It's a game of whack-a-mole.
Right. So they realized they had to change the target. They had to go after the digital landlords instead.
And here's where it gets really interesting. That brings us to the new legal arsenal.
Let's break that down.
The analyses from Baker McKenzie and Rouse detail a monumental shift in the regulatory framework, driven primarily by Decree 17 and Decree 341.
And what do those decrees actually do?
The state has completely rewritten the liabilities for intermediary service providers, or ISPs.
So not just the pirates themselves.
Right. We are talking about the hosting companies, the cloud storage providers, the social networks.
Okay, let's ground this in a real scenario to understand the gravity of these decrees. Let's say I run a local cloud storage company in Vietnam.
Okay.
In the past, if a pirate syndicate used my servers to host 10,000 stolen movies, I could basically claim ignorance.
You'd say, I just rent the server space. I don't know what's on it.
Right. Maybe I'd get a nominal administrative fine if I ignored an email. But under Decree 17 and 341, my reality changes entirely.
Dramatically. First, the financial penalties have transitioned from flat fees to economic impact fines.
Meaning they hit much harder.
Yes, your organization can now be fined up to 500 million Vietnamese dong based on the calculated economic damage of the piracy or the illegal profit generated.
That is a massive hike.
But the real teeth lie in the strict notice and takedown framework.
So if I own that cloud company, I now have explicit legal liabilities baked into my operations.
You do.
I must develop built-in automated tools to receive takedown requests. I am legally required to verify user information when a new client rents server space.
And here's the ultimate hammer. If you receive a substantiated takedown request from a copyright holder, and you fail to remove the infringing content within the mandated window,
What happens?
your cloud storage company faces joint liability for the piracy.
Wow, joint liability.
You are no longer just a passive landlord. In the eyes of the law, you are a co-conspirator in the intellectual property theft.
That means the hosting provider can be held financially and legally responsible for the crime itself.
Exactly.
And the state is clearly no longer satisfied with just issuing administrative slaps on the wrist. They are moving to actual criminal prosecution.
Yet the landmark precedent that set the tone for this current crackdown actually happened in 2024.
The Best Buy IPTV case, right?
Yes. The target was Lahai Nam, the operator of a notorious service called Best Buy IPTV.
I remember reading about that.
This service had been a thorn in the side of global broadcasters for years, consistently appearing on the USTR's notorious markets list.
And for the first time in Vietnam's history regarding online piracy, the People's Court of Hanoi utilized the criminal justice system.
They really sent a message.
They handed Nam a 30-month suspended criminal sentence alongside roughly $40,000 in combined fines and the confiscation of his illegal profits.
And that verdict sent an absolute shockwave through the local tech sector. It proved the government was willing to put a human being behind bars, or at least under severe criminal probation, for operating these networks.
It's not just a cost of doing business anymore.
Exactly. And crucially, this accountability isn't stopping at the server racks. The government is aggressively targeting the financial lifeblood of the syndicates too.
You mean ad revenue?
Yes,
Ad revenue.
because you can't pay for enterprise CDNs without massive cash flow.
And the Ministry of Information and Communications is now heavily penalizing legitimate online ad platforms that place advertisements on pirated or legally toxic content.
The regulatory net being cast over the digital advertising space is incredibly broad right now. It impacts both domestic and cross-border platforms.
I saw in the documents that WPP Media faced fines for placing advertisements on a drama titled Flight to You.
Yes, that was a big deal.
And as a reminder, we are strictly reporting the content of the Vietnamese regulations and enforcement actions here without taking any political stance. But the penalty was levied because the broadcast contained what Vietnamese authorities designate as the illegal cow tongues line.
Right, which is a reference to territorial map disputes.
Exactly. And the reporting also highlights that YouTube, altering its internal algorithms to comply with local regulatory demands, removed 25 channels that state authorities designated as reactionary.
Again, very strict enforcement.
Right. And we are just imparting the facts from the sources neutrally. But the takeaway for any business listening is crystal clear.
What's that?
The operational environment in Vietnam is now intensely regulated. If your ad network inadvertently funds a pirate site or places media on content violating local statutes, the state will aggressively target your revenue streams.
So we have this sweeping legal apparatus now in place. We have 500 million dong economic impact fines, joint liability for cloud providers, the very real threat of criminal sentencing, and severe crackdowns on ad networks.
It sounds comprehensive.
It does. But the true effectiveness of decrees and legislation isn't proven in a courtroom. It is tested in real time under the extreme logistical stress of the live internet.
Which brings us to the actual front lines of this crackdown, live sports broadcasting.
This is where it gets crazy.
Because the speed of modern piracy is just staggering. The sources mentioned the domestic film Red Rain. It was officially released on the TV 360 platform, and within mere hours, it was ripped, duplicated, and available on hundreds of pirated websites.
Mere hours.
But when we are dealing with a live English Premier League match, an enforcement window of a few hours is entirely useless.
Completely useless. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to understand the mechanics of how syndicates actually deliver a live broadcast without getting shut down.
How do they stay online during a live game?
They utilize a highly sophisticated architecture known as the domain cluster model. The Xoilac ecosystem is the most notorious example of this in Vietnam.
Domain cluster, what does that mean?
Well, they don't just register one website like Xoilac.com and broadcast from there.
Right, because if they did, the authorities would just tell the local internet service providers to block that single URL, and the stream would die.
Exactly. One block, and they're done. So instead, syndicates use automated scripts to register hundreds, sometimes thousands, of backup domain names simultaneously.
Thousands of them.
Yes, and they connect all these domains through advanced DNS routing and automated load balancers.
It's essentially like financial shell companies that use algorithms to instantly incorporate a new LLC the exact second an old one gets audited.
That is a perfect way to look at it. It's a digital shell game. So a legitimate broadcaster spots an illegal stream of a Manchester United game on one of these domains.
Okay.
They scramble their legal team, draft a formal takedown notice, and send it to the authorities. The authorities process it, order the local ISPs to block the domain, and the URL finally goes dark.
But the viewer barely even notices, right?
They don't. The syndicate's load balancers detect the block, and within a fraction of a second, the automated DNS routing seamlessly migrates the entire viewing audience to a pre-registered backup domain.
Just a slight flicker and you're back.
Exactly. The illegal stream continues without dropping a single frame of the broadcast. It is a brilliantly engineered automated failover system, and it highlights a fundamental logistical nightmare for human law enforcement.
Right, let's do the math on the logistics here. A standard football match is exactly 90 minutes long, plus a few minutes of stoppage time.
Very short window.
If a broadcaster has to manually identify a stream, generate a legal PDF, email it to a government agency, wait for a bureaucrat to verify it, and then have that agency mandate a nationwide IP block across multiple different internet service providers.
It takes forever.
Yeah, that process easily takes over 2 hours.
And by the time the block is finally executed, the stadium is empty, the game is over.
The Pirates have already broadcast the entire match, they have already cashed out their lucrative betting ad revenue, and the financial damage to the legitimate rights holder is permanent.
Damage is done.
The manual legal process is fundamentally incompatible with the lifespan of a live event.
Which is precisely why domestic broadcasters are making a desperate, urgent plea to the government right now.
What are they asking for?
They realize that sending emails and PDFs is a losing strategy. They are demanding the implementation of a synchronous mechanism with the network operators.
Meaning what, exactly?
They need an automated electronic portal, an API integration that connects the broadcaster's detection software directly to the state's blocking infrastructure.
Oh, wow. Direct access.
Yes, they are proposing an integrated system designed to execute a nationwide block on violating websites within exactly 15 minutes of detection.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. That is the new battle line being drawn in this crackdown. The broadcasters argue that if the state cannot intercept, verify, and kill an illegal stream within that specific 15-minute window, copyright protection for live sports in Vietnam is effectively meaningless.
15 minutes to coordinate a legal block across an entire nation's internet infrastructure.
It's incredibly fast.
That requires an unprecedented level of real-time technological integration between private media corporations and state telecommunications. It completely redefines the speed of legal enforcement.
It does, and it forces us to step back and reconsider the entire landscape of what we are witnessing this month.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We started this deep dive looking at what initially seemed like a routine, localized effort to shut down some movie streaming sites.
With some blocked websites.
But tracing the causality reveals a vastly larger ecosystem.
We follow the technology from massive enterprise CDNs handling billions of movies visits, all the way down to the malicious firmware turning living room streaming boxes into bidirectional proxy nodes for global cybercriminals.
It's terrifying when you zoom out.
And we've seen how the sheer scale of those extortion networks triggered international tariff threats from Washington, forcing the Vietnamese government into a frantic geopolitical chess match to protect a multi-billion-dollar trade surplus.
We watched the legal paradigm shift to target the digital landlords, right? threatening cloud CEOs with joint liability and criminal prison sentences.
Real consequences.
And it has all culminated in a technological arms race, with broadcasters demanding API-level integration to execute 15-minute takedowns against automated domain clusters.
The speed is everything now.
It just proves that clicking a pirated link is never a victimless workaround. That click actively fuels a global cybercrime infrastructure, it risks your personal data, and literally shapes the trade policies of nations.
The hidden architecture behind free content is just immense. But, as we look at the broadcasters frantically building these automated tools to hit that 15-minute takedown window, it leaves me with one final, deeply provocative thought.
What's that?
Well, right now, the syndicates are using automated scripts to register backup domains.
Yeah, they do domain clusters.
But technology is accelerating. What happens in the very near future when these piracy syndicates fully integrate generative AI into their infrastructure?
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that.
Imagine an AI system that doesn't just rely on a pre-registered list of hundreds of domains. Imagine an AI that can automatically generate, register, and launch thousands of uniquely coded derivative domains, complete with deepfake proxy streams and decentralized routing every single second.
Just infinite backups.
Exactly. If the pirates fully automate their evasion tactics using artificial intelligence, will human legal enforcement, no matter how fast their 15-minute electronic portals are, ever be able to keep up with an ecosystem that is generating infinite new infrastructure at the speed of computation?
That is a chilling question, and it guarantees that this 15-minute war is really only the beginning of a much larger conflict. See you again in the next episode of this podcast.